morning, everyone. If you can go ahead and finish up conversations and have a seat, I'd appreciate it. My name is Shawn Turner. I'm your speaker this morning. I own and operate Turner Flowers down in Ottawa. Any of you that have been down to Ottawa and been on the historic Main Street has likely seen or been in our shop. Don't hold it against me being here in Lawrence. I have a degree from K-State focused on agricultural education and horticulture with greenhouse management. Wanted to share a little bit about me with you, just so you kind of know what you're getting into. Get the middle or the point?
Should be the right.
That's what I thought too. Let's try that one.
Sometimes it is the left. It'll come up here.
No, it's,
What if I hit the
it's,
slide
we're
button
not like
down here?
activating the right page.
Not in PowerPoint.
Can I just hit this little arrow? There you go.
Now it should.
That'll work. Hey, fantastic. All right, a little about me. I grew up in the family greenhouse and flower shop and in the fair judging world. My dad was an extension agent in Johnson County in the 1970s when there was still nearly 200,000 acres of agriculture in Johnson County. If you can imagine that, and now 50 years later, that is certainly not the case. Dad left extension to go back into the flower shop and the greenhouses, which is about when I came into effect. So as a small child, we had a half-acre greenhouse. I knew it was hot. I knew it was hard work. I didn't think that horticulture and agriculture had a place for me. But I also knew that since Dad had been an extension agent, he got invitations to go be a judge at many county fairs around. So as a small toddler, I got to go around with Dad to those county fairs and watch and listen to him judge a variety of things, from crops to floral to just a little bit of everything. And so I learned a great deal from him over the years and have really enjoyed that relationship and getting to share that knowledge from him. When I finished up at K-State, I had an extensive FFA career, and I had an opportunity to become a high school agriculture teacher and FFA advisor. I actually taught at Spring Hill, just south of Kansas City. Had about 180 kids a day with 8 different preps. And when I could physically feel my blood pressure, I knew it was time to get out. Think I'm kidding? No. And so the plan was, when we bought this current flower shop location, I was 19 years old, bought a flower shop in partnership with my parents. They said, "Is this something you want to come back to one day?" And I said, "Sure, let me teach 10 or 15 years and I'll be back." 2.5 years later, feeling my blood pressure, I said, "I'm coming home." Dad said, "Thank God." Here's the number of the flower guy, here's the number of the plant guy, I'll be at the farm, deuces. And so that's pretty much how that went. Well, as soon as I quit teaching, word got around that, hey, Turner's kid has also been an ag ed, maybe he would judge county fairs too. So Dad and I both judge county fairs now, and this year will be our 3rd or 4th year judging together at the state fair. That has been an incredible opportunity that we've watched each other judge for years, but getting to judge together has been just, I just can't explain it, just an incredible opportunity. So I quit teaching in 2012, starting there with that fair season, I started doing different county fairs around, and I do probably a dozen different counties at this point every summer, which fits really well between my wedding season in June at the flower shop wraps up, and my fall wedding season in September ramps up. And so that July-August season works really well for fair judging. We feel very blessed to do that. I always tell counties there's 3 things that I don't judge. I don't judge photography because it's highly subjective. I don't judge fashion review because we don't need the rumors that would start with the male florist judging a fashion review. And I don't judge leadership posters because I think they're bullshit. So there's several different things about entries in fairs that I'm going to mention today. Some of them may be controversial. I apologize in advance. First, I'm going to mention is age appropriateness and ability levels. I see this in floriculture and some other projects. Some county fairs, think about the little fair down at Kincaid, they have a pumpkin decorating contest. And you will find this pumpkin that is elaborately toll painted. It might be embellished with rhinestones. It might be perfectly outlined. And it says, entry, Emmy Mae Smith, age 2.5. I don't think so. That shows me what grandma can do. That shows me what mom can do. That does not show me that you engage that child in some sort of a horticultural pursuit. I would much rather see a sloppy project that I know that you and the child had an experience and made a memory Then that while the child was at mom's house, grandma got out her Toll paints and made me a beautiful pumpkin. So that's a pet peeve thing for me. You see it at some counties, you don't see it at all of them. So some probing questions for those of you that do have kids that are getting into that judging process. What I typically judge here at the Douglas County Fair, and have wonderful help from Nancy and several other master gardeners, is the 4-H horticulture and crops. And so we have about a 5 or 6 hour window of an afternoon that I'm doing nothing but conference judging with children for hours on end. There's 2 words to describe that: birth control. But I always try to engage the kids in some questions. And so I always say, what can you tell me about your project? And so I'm not wanting to hear, well, this is my zucchini. I'm going to say, well, you know, we planted the zucchini, or we found the baby zucchini planted here. Here's how often I water it. I use some fertilizer. Or in crops, this is the variety of corn, and the field is located, 2 miles down from our house. And I got to help Dad drive in the tractor rather than Dad planted the corn, and my brother and sister and I were all supposed to enter corn. And so Dad showed up with a bushel basket full of corn and told us to each pick out 10 ears. I want to see the student engaged. I want them to get their hands dirty. I want them to have an experience and make a memory. Dad often talks about helping with the American Royal Horse Show back in the 70s, and that you could note which students cared for their horses, that you could tell that they fed their horses and they were the ones that helped train their horses. And you could see which ones that the trainer rode the horse up to the ring, the trainer got off, the child got on and entered the event. And I would argue that the child that maybe didn't have the best horse had the best experience and learned the most, because they got their hands dirty and they were engaged with that project. So we're going to start with horticulture and crop judging today. There is an extension bulletin that Sharon has got a copy of. She has a few print copies back there. If you'd like a PDF copy that you can add to your iPad, we can hook you up with that. And you'll hear me say this over and over: if you're not sure, check the bulletin and check the fair book. Every county is a little different. Every community is a little different. Just check the fair book. Display materials. If you have just a few little cherry tomatoes, please do not bring me a 14-inch Dixie serving platter. Think about a little foam saucer. Think about a little dish. Think about a size of a plate or a bowl or a vase is appropriate to what you're displaying. Berry boxes for berries, things like that. Not only just because it looks more intelligent, but also because we've had such a volume of entries the last couple of years. There's just no room. And so if we have a little entry, it needs to be on a little plate, make room for some others. So varieties and cultivars, this is going to be more for when you're working with those 4-H students that are doing consultation judging. If they have tomatoes, the judge really wants to know what kind of tomatoes they are. If it's corn for crops, we'd really like to know what variety of corn it was. Not only for our own curiosity of that's a cool tomato, we'd like to grow it, but again, are these students engaged with the project? Do they know what they're growing? Rather than, yeah, Dad planted some tomatoes and this looked like a pretty one, so I brought it into the fair. Looking at quality, and you're going to see this on vegetables and flowers both. So the condition of the vegetable. Did we clean it? Did we pick at the right spot? I noted green beans here. With green beans, more often than not, kids and adults both. I'll see that we have picked green beans and then we have pinched the end with the stem off, and we pulled a 1/4 inch of the green bean off when we pulled the stem off. 1, it's not attractive. 2, it's not going to last very long and stay fresh to where you can then serve it to your families. Think about if you were picking it to keep it in the fridge or keeping it to preserve for the winter. If you were, a homesteader in 1872 and you were needing those potatoes or onions to last your family for the winter, how would you prepare those to do that? And we'll talk about that more with potatoes and onions here in a minute. If it's overripe, think about when you're entering it. Think about how many days it's going to be on display. Are the people that come to the fair the last 3 days going to have anything to look at, or are they going to smell something that smells like your compost bin? And we'll touch on that in flowers as well. And then consistency. If you have, say, a small vegetable and it says you need 5, Are those 5 of consistent shape, consistent size, consistent rightness, or are they just the 5 that you were able to find? Imagine your most OCD friend and pretend that your judge is probably going to be that guy. Zucchini. Okay, pet peeve here for Dad and I both. Baseball bats. Almost every fair, we get somebody that brings in this zucchini that is 3 times longer than the plate it is sitting on. It might be overripe, it might have bug bites, it could be god awful. But because it's the biggest one, I just know I'm going to get the blue ribbon. There are some fairs that have a largest zucchini contest. That's where those belong. If we're entering a zucchini and it's not the largest zucchini contest, I don't want the largest zucchini. I want a zucchini that I would eat. I want a zucchini that does not have seeds the size of my thumbs. I want it to be tender. I want it to be uniform. I want it to be unmarred, unscraped, unscratched. I want to have a little bit of stem left. Just like the green beans, I've seen people that take their knife and slice through the end inch of the zucchini and then slap it on the plate. And then 2 days later, when I come in to judge it, it is a dried, nasty mess on the end where a stem used to be. And you think you should thank this veteran for its service because it's an amputee. And it just looks awful on the plate. And so think about the presentation because we're going to be judging it against a gold standard. Tallest and biggest is not, zucchini are not alone. Some fairs will be looking for the tallest soybean plant. Uh-oh. Well, my screen's still on and the lights are still on.
This one out.
Yeah, the projector is what went out there. Oh, light blinked. That's a good sign. Cross your fingers, wiggle your toes.
Don't look directly at it.
I do not stare directly. Fantastic. So corn stalks, soybeans, watermelons, pumpkins, these are common things that we are going to look at as far as being the biggest. What I like is a judge with the biggest contest. It is an objective thing. If it is a pumpkin or a watermelon, we walk in with a scale and we set that fruit on the scale. If it weighs the most, it's the biggest one. Easy peasy. I can take out a Stanley measuring tape and put it against your stalk of corn, next to your stalk of corn, next to your, and we know who's the biggest. Nobody's going to question it. Nobody's going to argue it. It is an objective number. Onions and potatoes. So again, consistency and size. If you've got 5 on your plate, they should be about the same size, about the same ripeness. They should be all the same variety. Please don't mix your white onions and yellow onions on one plate. Cleaning for storage. Think about your grandparents and your great-grandparents with their root cellar. So often, and when I say so often, I mean every fair I judge, there will be a plate of potatoes and a plate of onions that has been scrubbed clean to such a degree that the plant tissue has been damaged. And between the time that they scrubbed it in their kitchen sink and they got it to the plate in front of me in the fair, it's sticky. Think about if you were depending on these onions and potatoes to be in your root cellar until February so that you and your family had something to eat. If you have rubbed that protective layer off of that onion and potato to such a degree that it is sticky, it's going to rot before Christmas, let alone last you until February to feed your family in the middle of the winter. Take a damp cloth, wipe them off with the damp cloth, but don't scrub and get that protective waxy coating off of your potato. Don't peel the skins off of your onions. Just take a damp cloth and get the soil residue and everything off of there. You can have a clean, shiny onion that still has a little bit of dry skin around it. And we're going to know that, okay, this is an onion that has some shelf life so that we don't have to eat 3 bushels of onions in the next 4 days before they start to rot. So tomatoes, probably the biggest conversation we've had the last few years. Is this a small fruit? Is this a medium fruit? Oh my God. Well, it is a fruit because it's a tomato and tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. But is it small? Is it medium? Do we need 5? Do we need 10? Do we need 6? How many do we need? Read your fair book. But for the most part, if it is a cherry tomato, a grape tomato, a pear tomato, to me, that's small. If this is a slicing tomato that you would put on a burger, it's medium now. That's a fairly good rule of thumb, but use your best judgment. It's really hard to take a plate of 5 little tiny sweet 100 tomatoes and put them against a dozen other plates that all have twice as many so that we can see the consistency and the bounty of that garden. Now, granted, in 4-H, every plate is judged against itself. Open class, everybody's judged against each other. And we just have those 3 ribbons. Even if there's 20 entries, we've got to pick the 3 best plates out of there. And if everybody else has got 10 really consistent little tomatoes and you walk in with 5, odds are good that you're probably not going to go home with a ribbon or a premium that day. So consistency is key. Are they split? Have they been in the sun? You will think that you can put those tomatoes upside down on the plate and it will fool your judge. As Pam, full disclosure, Pam and I are cousins, don't hold it against her. As Pam will tell you, really working on not being so shy. And so I will gingerly reach out and peek under your tomato to see if there's splits on the bottom of it. And there is, chances are you're going to bounce down to the bottom. Now I have people, and also think about, are they going to be rotten by the end of the week? Is that anything anybody's going to want to look at, smell, appreciate by the last few days of fare? Probably not. Ripeness. I've been asked, what about green tomatoes? Does the fair book say they have to be ripe? I don't think so. Of course, if you've got 5 consistent, beautiful green tomatoes, bring them to me. I'll give you a ribbon and then we'll fry them. It's great. You know, so I don't have a problem with green tomatoes. But on stems, double check your fair book, regardless of what fair you're in, double check your fair book. But when in doubt, remove all the stems. If you think about if you were a commercial tomato grower and you had bins and baskets of tomatoes, and you left all the stems on your tomatoes, what would those tomatoes do to the neighboring tomatoes? Or did your shelf life just go? Just got flushed down the toilet. And so again, thinking about on a survival and a grower basis, you get those stems off of there for the sake of its neighboring tomatoes. Berries. Again, read your fair book. Look at your specificity. Do you need 10? Do you need 12? If it's elderberries and they're the size of BB gun pebbles, it's going to take more than 12 to make it look like you've got a basket of elderberries. And folks tend to do a really good job with that at this fair. And we'll also say that the Douglas County Fair is the only one that I've ever run into goji berries, acai berries, any of those types of things. I don't know of any other county in the state that I've ever been brought a berry other than a blackberry, a blueberry, a raspberry, those types of things. So think about what's going to make a good presentation. Are they clean? Yes.
So for elderberries particularly.
Yes. Off the stem.
Okay.
Take a fork.
Don't bring in the sign, like, look at that.
No, I want you to, so grab a berry box, take a fork, pull them gently off of the stems with the fork, leave that arsenic-filled stem at home, please. Yep, and think about the way I would think about it is if you were going to sell your berries at a farmer's market, you would clean them and put them in a box. So if you're going to bring them to the fair, treat it like the farmer's market, clean them and put them in a box.
But they're so small,
Mhm.
still like 10 or 12. What large?
I would probably do 100. Yeah, fill up a berry box.
Okay.
When we've seen it before, they brought in like a pint berry box and it's been about half full. That's what I've seen before when we've had entries here. And that, it takes a lot of elderberries to make a jar of jelly. And if you haven't tried doing elderberry and pineapple together or elderberry and wild plum together, please try it. You'll be delighted. Herbs. I love grabbing all the different basil and mint leaves and smelling them and looking for purity of smell. But again, look at your fair book. I have some savory here that I grabbed out in your garden. If it says 5 stems in the fair book, don't bring me in this wide stem that's worth 3 stems and then do 2 other stems with it. We really do want 5 consistent stems. When you have these stems, there's where I trimmed them. Anything that's going to be under the water, go ahead and wipe off. And we're going to get into that in floriculture too. But by pulling those off of there, You're not going to have that source of bacteria that can grow down in the water. And as far as that goes, please go ahead and use tap water with any of your entries that use water, because that little bit of chlorine that the municipalities put in there is going to cut down on your buildup of mildew and fungus and degradation. It's going to help your base life a little bit. We always think we're doing the right thing by using spring water or filtered water or bottled water. Go ahead and use municipal water on your cut flowers and your crops that are in water, and that will help them last just a little bit longer. So I'm going to make you a mess here on the desk. Is that okay?
Sure,
Good, I've already started. Okay. So I've gone ahead and cleaned these 5 stems. So there's my 5 stems of my herbs. And I'm going to have me a little vase. I'm going to set those in there just like that. And that's my herb display. It doesn't have to be huge. If they're 5 and they're nice and they're consistent. If they are picture perfect where you can see those herbs laying on the table in a Better Homes and Gardens catalog, that's what we're looking for. So often we will find herbs that there are leaves that have insect bites in them and burn holes and half leaves where things got a bite taken out of them and interveinal chlorosis where they should have been fertilized. And there's so many herbs that we see in other counties, especially, that you go, I don't think I'd want to garnish my food with that. And so if you take a look at it and you go, this is appetizing, I would totally display this with my lamb roast. Please bring it to the fair. So hay, how many of you still have a hay field and do some crops? Anybody? There are a few of you. So I will tell you, as a florist, I have about every allergy that you can imagine. And I take 3 different allergy remedies on the daily, and I will still stick my nose in your flake of hay because I love the smell of the alfalfa. So I'm looking at the color. We know that when we cut the hay, how we dry the hay all affects the color. And so we're looking for pure. If it is brome and not prairie, I want everything in there to be brome. I don't want to see fescue. I don't want to see gamma grass. If it is entered as brome, I want to see brome. If it is a prairie mix, it could have a little bit of anything in there. Oh dear. Oh, we're back. Oh, good. And then with alfalfa, I'm going to give it a shake. When we dry alfalfa, we do want it to retain its color. We want it to be dry and we don't want it to be moldy, but we also don't want it to be so dry that it's dropping leaves all over the place. So I'm going to give it a shake and see if it retains those leaves, because that's where our energy value is for our livestock that's eating that alfalfa. I want to see just how fresh that is. Whoop. Ears of field corn. Can you see on this one? This is from the Douglas County Fair. You can see Nikki's hammer and the nails right there. Notice on this one, we didn't have full germination to the end of the ears. And so they have pinched or cut off the ends of the ears. And then that next set of ears down, you can see the full germination all the way to the end of those. That's what I'd rather see. Now, this one had really consistent rows and full, and it did really well. And they pinched anything off, so they still had a blue ribbon. But you'll see that those 2 behind it, they're all the way to the end. They could have a few defects in the rows, but because I could see the germination clear to the end, they were still blue too. Now it's 4H jetting, so we can give as many blues as we wanted if it was worth it. But we want all 10 of those ears to be as alike as possible, free of worms, mold, smut, all of those other types of defects. Before I stack them in a pyramid, I'm going to lay them out on the table. I'm going to set one end all even, and I'm going to see how consistent they are. And I'm going to roll them over and see how consistent they are. It's kind of like your splits on the bottom of your tomatoes. Don't feel like you can put the ugly side of your corn down and make a pyramid, and the judge won't find it because he's probably going to pull it apart. Jars of grain in the cone of shame. How many know what I'm talking about without me even doing a description? So when you have jars of wheat, of soybeans, of Milo, of anything like that, some fairs, they don't want to have to clean as much, or they don't have as much good stuff to offer. So they will put a styrofoam cone in the middle of their giant gallon glass jar. And so when I have a jar of grain, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to spin it. I'm going to be looking for weed seeds. I'm going to be looking for insects. I'm going to be looking for chaff left over by the combine. I really want them to take those wheat or that beans and winnow it in a screen, get all the dust, all the chaff, all the mess out of there, and give me a clean gallon jar of beans or of wheat kernels or whatever it is. Some fair books allow the filler cone. Some don't. Again, I always read every fair book before I start judging at a fair so I don't penalize somebody for something that's legal. Be careful about some of those, the newer ball mason jars. There's a new gallon one that has a press-on lid rather than threads that you can kind of use as a cookie jar sort of thing, and it would still seal soup. But when you pick it up and you go like this, and you can almost pull that lid off and have soybeans all over the floor. I've had some close calls. I've not had any disasters. Please bring a jar that has threaded lids. Jars of honey. Do we have any beekeepers in the room? No, I'm surprised. I love judging honey. People always think that color is one of the keys to honey. Well, color is affected by what the bee grabbed its pollen from. If it's near a buckwheat field, that honey is going to be really, really dark, and it's going to have an earthy molasses sort of flavor to it. Doesn't make it good or bad. It's just a preference sort of thing. Other types of hay and flowers and things are going to yield a lighter honey. But what we're looking for heavily is clarity and viscosity. Is it cloudy or is it clear when I look through the jar? And then when I grab that jar, I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to watch how fast the bubble rises to the top. The slower that bubble moves, the higher the sugar content of the honey, the higher the viscosity, the higher ribbon it's going to receive, because we're looking for sugar content on the honey. Garden displays. All I'm going to say about those is when we have somebody bring in a basket and have a lovely cloth in it and make this display, make sure that every vegetable that's in there meets the regulations of that vegetable individually. If it was a 5 to a plate tomato and it should have had the stems removed, then make sure that they are consistent and that there's 5 and that the stems are removed. Don't bring me a baseball bat zucchini in your garden display, please and thank you. Make sure it's one that would have gotten a blue ribbon by itself as a zucchini before it goes in your garden display. Gimmicks are cute, but the vegetables have got to be good too. All right, rolling into flowers. There's an extension bulletin for that, 826. Again, we've got some copies back here. We can get you a PDF copy. Great document. So talking about vases and containers, some fair books specify that you have to have clear glass. Some say clear glass or plastic. I have been to some fairs that will take water bottles and they'll cut the top half off of the water bottle, and that's their vase. It's a throwaway and they don't have to come back for it. But then at some fairs too, they don't have a lovely air-conditioned facility for their flowers like you do. I think specifically about the Miami County Fair, which uses a retired livestock barn as its floriculture and crops barn. It's about 107 degrees out there. And they try to put entries in the first day of the fair and have them good through the end of the fair. People will take pieces of saran wrap. Now, I know how Lawrence feels about plastic, but I'll tell you this anyway. Take pieces of saran wrap and wad it up around the stem of the flowers and push it down to the surface of the water in an effort to decrease the rate of evaporation of the water in their vases. And if they take a big enough wad of saran wrap and push it down in there, it looks like ice crystals down in their recycled water bottle, and they think it's really, really pretty. Bless their hearts. Typically, what container you use will not affect your ribbon so long as it's not a container that's against the rules. It can be an ugly container, but as long as it fits the rules, you're okay. But if it says clear in glass, please use clear in glass. So bringing up water full. Think about how long it's going to be at the fair. Make sure your water is full when you get there and not just a 1/4 inch because you were afraid that Susie was going to spill it in the car. If you need to add water when you get to the fair, take it in the bathroom, add water when you get to the fair. And keeping it full, they're going to drink fast, especially if it's a warm display. Water level is going to go down. Do you need to add things to the water? Tap water is really sufficient. There are chemicals that a lot of flower shops use, Floralife and things like that, but they will pulse, and every bucket in their cooler is full of it, and every vase in their cooler is full of it. We are a no added chemical flower shop. We have found that physical stem treatments and fresh water every other day is just as, if not more valuable than a chemical treatment to the water. And so when people buy, I'll get somebody every week that'll say, well, where's that little packet like I got on my flowers at the grocery store? Well, that little packet of Floralife is trying to simulate the carbohydrate that that parent plant would have given to that flower. More often than not, it is a different sugar structure chemically than what the parent plant would have offered. And often people do not fully dissolve that sugar in their water, creating a syrup, clogging up the xylem and phloem of their plant. So they're not only not feeding that plant carbohydrates, they're also choking it out from all of the water that it really wanted to survive anyway. So when you get those little packets, ignore them, throw them away. You don't want them. There's lots of old wives' tales about things you can put in your water to extend your base life, from sugar to 7-Up. There was a university on the East Coast that even tried Viagra in your water. I will tell you, if your tulips stay erect for more than 4 weeks, contact your local. But just be careful about what you put in the water. You didn't warn them about me adequately, did you? Just a fun surprise, sure. Who is this unhinged florist? Oh my God. So choosing specimens, we want you to choose something fresh. We want to look at the maturity of it. Don't be afraid to cut things the week before the fair and keep it in your fridge. I found some things out here in your garden that had a lot of people bring in one that looks like this. It was, the 2 lines I get is, it was my biggest one. Or you should have seen it yesterday. I'm sure I should have, but I didn't. Ew. But if you find one that's a little smaller, much higher quality, a lot better to use, that's the one you need to be entering rather than this with your giant zucchini. Quality first, size later. Are the stems long enough to not just reach the water, but also to reach the water in 2 or 3 days as it evaporates and goes down? As a florist, I like to see the stems go near the bottom of the vase because your typical consumer ignores and neglects their cut flowers and is not going to realize the water is low until it's almost too late. If my stems only go halfway into the water, they're really not going to notice until it's way, way, way too late. So I tell folks, you're getting long stems, trim 1/4 inch off the stem every other day, put fresh tap water in your vase to keep bacterial buildup at bay. That will give you the longest vase life of any cut flower you will find. So count and consistency, marigolds are no different than potatoes. If it says 5, do 5. Don't bring me a branch of 3 and then 2 little ones and say, well, that's 5, because the consistency is not there, but I've seen it a dozen times. So lily stain. I compare lilies to beef cattle. Okay. We go ahead and cut bulls into steers for the purpose of improving the quality of the meat and the manageability of the livestock. Similarly, we should pluck the stamen off of our lilies so that he doesn't accidentally pollinate the flower next to him, because that flower has one job in mind for its life, and that job is to multiply and prosper. And once he has been fertilized, he believes his job is done. If you pull those stamen off, he thinks he's got to wait until an insect comes along and pollinates him, and you're going to get a little more vase life out of him because he thinks there's still life to live. Plus, it just doesn't make near as much of a mess on your white linen tablecloth. And these aren't as bad as some. If you look at a starfighter or stargazer lilies and they get those big yellow fuzzy mustard powder yuck.
So do you leave the center inside?
I leave the center, yes. I just pluck the boy part out. I leave the girl part intact. Partly because that girl part in the center is part of the look of the flower. And while the stamen is too, the stamen is where your mess and your problems come from. That's another reason that farmers cut their bulls. Never thought you'd have that correlation today, did you? So now your chemistry, am I going over time? I'm just keeping trucking here. Are we good? Okay, super. So want to talk about ethylene gas a little bit and give a chemistry lesson for you. So have any of you raised the top of a pineapple before and turned it into a plant? How long does it take to bear a fruit?
Oh, gosh, we never did.
It took me 4 years.
Oh, it did.
It took 4 years. It can take up to 5, anywhere from 2 to 5 years once you take the top off of a pineapple and peel those bottom leaves off and they invigorate the rootlets and get it to root and grow it into a pineapple plant. Ethylene gas can cause FBI, floral bud initiation, in plants like pineapples. And so a lot of folks that have a pineapple plant, it hasn't bloomed, it hasn't produced, They'll take a clear garbage bag and they'll take a bunch of rotting apple cores and they'll put it in the pot around the pineapple plant, pull that up around it and make it a bubble because those rotting apple cores are going to emit ethylene gas and cause floral bud initiation and hopefully bring that pineapple into bloom. Similarly, ethylene causes leaf and petal abscission in mature flowers. And so if you have flowers that you have cut early and you want to save them for the fair and put them in the fridge, look in your fridge and see if you have a lot of fresh fruit and vegetables, because fresh fruit and vegetables emits ethylene gas and it's going to age and accelerate the maturation of the flowers that you put in that refrigerator. If you have a beer fridge in the garage, that is where your flowers belong, because flowers and beer get along just fine, and beer does not emit ethylene. So think about that if you're picking your flowers early and you want to hold them over a few days until the fair. So looking at arrangements, there are some floral design principles. Freshness is one of the things that we look at, but there's several that we're going to look at and talk about today. So 7 key principles of floral design. Many of you are masters at this. Many of you have not touched it before. Speaking of masters, I will say that I find the term master gardener ironic, because as any of us know, there is no such thing to mastery of gardening. We learn something new every year. There is always a new variable. It's just like we say that doctors practice medicine because they will never master it. They're constantly learning. And I feel like we are lifelong learners as gardeners and as florists. We're never going to master a lick of it. So I find the name of the program highly ironic, but I know that we appreciate it. Balance. There's 2 kinds of balance. There is physical balance. Is this going to stand up on its own? There is visual balance. Does it look like it's going to stand on its own? Example, Leaning Tower of Pisa. Can it stand on its own? Yes, it has physical balance. Does it look like it's ready to topple over? Well, before that last round of repairs, it absolutely did. So it did not have visual balance because it did not look steady on its feet. And so we want our arrangements to be both physically and visually balanced when we're producing a floral arrangement for ourselves or for the fair. Scale types of things. If I have a ginormous flower, I don't necessarily want to put it in a little thimble of a vase. I want to give it a vase that seems proportionate. When I'm looking at floral designs, I want to be able to take my vase and give it a spin, and the flowers move as a single unit rather than looking like the arrangement's going to fall apart. I want it to be bomb-proof, to where it can be moved, it can be jostled. We can move it from the kitchen counter to the dining room table and deliver it to our friend Susie down the street. And where we put those flowers is where they stay. And that comes with starting with a good frog. Now, when I say a frog, it could be the old-fashioned glass frog that goes in the top of the vase. It could be the spiked brass frog that goes in the bottom of the vase. It could be tape crisscrossed on top of your vase to hold the stems in place. Or my favorite, judiciously placed greenery that creates a place for stems to rest securely. And so I have several different types of greenery that I found out in the garden. Don't worry, I got permission to cut all this. And let's see here. And so I even like to start in my hands. And so if you find something that you can use as a base, find some things to work around the outside, and find your smaller pieces to go around the outside to fill in the holes and make something that's kind of round. If I was doing this for something to last, you know, I would be peeling the leaves off of the bottom stems here because they're going to be down in the water. If I start with this, it didn't take long, it didn't take much, but I have this vase that wherever I put flowers in that vase, they're going to stay put where we set them to be. So then the next thing I'm going to look at is where I want my main flowers to be. If I have 2 flowers that are the same size, they're the same visual weight, but they are 2 different colors, I want the lighter one to be arranged above the darker one. If I have 2 flowers that are the same color, but one is smaller than the other, I want the smaller one to be above. Think about on your rose bush. Where do you find the largest, most open blooms? Lower on the plant. Where do I find the buds that are still to come? Above those open blooms. And so it gives us the perception of that arrangement being much more natural if our larger visual weight and our focal point is lower in the container. Our smaller, lighter visual weight things are up higher in the container. So lilies, again, I'm going to go ahead and strip any of those leaves that go underneath the water. Get yourself a good pair of clippers. You can spend ungodly amounts of money on clippers. I found these, they're like those Ikebana scissor types. I've got two different ones. I've got a short nose and a pointy nose. These are like $4 a piece. They work as well as any $50 pair I've ever found. But again, I've got big, heavy flowers, but I've got my darker color. I'm going to make it my focal down here towards the bottom. I've got a natural hole in my greenery that I'm going to let it fill. Now I've got the same size, but lighter color. So it's going to be a little bit higher in this space. And then I've got my smallest flower of the lighter color. I'm going to set it up here where it's kind of the larger up there in the top. In your flower beds in your garden, you've got thrillers, fillers, spillers. In your vase arrangement, you've got focals, lines, and fillers. So we've got our large focal flowers here. We've got some smaller focal flowers that we can nestle in around those. Hydrangeas. How many are hydrangea fans do we have? Lots of folks like hydrangeas. How do you keep your hydrangeas to be turgid?
Define turgid.
Turgid is your $10 word for
Viagra.
water pressure in the stem. What's that?
Viagra.
He's not wrong. So if you think about when your peace lily wilts, you can say, oh, my staphylium has lost turgidity. Turgidity is water pressure in the, sorry, Nancy, water pressure in the cell. And so there's some folks use alum on their hydrangeas, that they dip their stems in there once they have them hydrated. I find on any woody stem, any stem that is really high wax, lignin content, woody stem types of things, you want to cut, and then you want to think about the last stupid thing you heard a politician say. And you go ahead and you just let out all your peanut frustrations. You just beat the crap out of the end of that stem. That is one of the best things you can do for water uptake before you go to slide it in there. Now, in 2 days, when I cut the stems and I put fresh water in there, do it again. And by then, you'll have probably heard a different politician say something else stupid, and you'll have more pent-up aggressions to release, and it'll be great. So, and I can say that because I'm a candidate for county commissioner in Franklin County. So I correct all the other politicians. So you'll want to just beat the tar out of that stem. And again, it's a larger bloom, so I want it lower in the container so that it can be one of my focal points. Your focal point can be a large flower. It can be a bow. It can be a toy. It can be anything large and visual that you put near the edge of the container qualifies as a focal point in your arrangement. It can be a big flower. It doesn't have to be a big flower.
Question.
Yes.
Do you judge the arrangements from the front and the back?
If it's an all the way around arrangement, yes. If it's a one-sided arrangement, no.
Let me turn on the light.
Yeah, go ahead and flip that on so we can see. There we go. Shed some light on the subject. I've got some of these that make some really cool fillers. And again, I'm stripping the leaves that are going down in the water. I'm putting a chisel end stem on, or cut on the end of there. Some folks say you've got to cut your stems underwater. I think that's a load of hooey. But it's important because you're only going to be a matter of seconds until you get it into the water. But you do want that chisel tip. If I cut a flat tip on the end of my stem and it goes against the bottom of my vase, it's really hard for that water uptake to happen. But if I have a chisel tip hitting the bottom of my vase, I have increased the surface area that water can use to drink. And don't be afraid to use some cool grasses. These were out there, and that can create your line really well. So typically, if you're doing an arrangement, you want your arrangement to be 1.5 times the height of your vase. You can decide on your style if you want it to be formal and fussy and snug, if you want it to be wild and wispy and natural. Don't get too hung up on odd numbers. Everybody says, oh, I gotta have an odd number. No, you don't. You got a hole. Grab a 4th flower and stick it in there. Eryngium, I love. How many of you grow eryngium in your gardens at home? Wonderful stuff. Blue sea holly. There's several different varieties of it. I use it a lot. I did a wedding at one point for a farm family that we had known for a really long time. And I was pinning the boutonniere on the grandpa and he goes like this. You pinning a damn thistle on me. I said, yes, hold still. So any of those types of fillers. So you can see how this gives a really natural. I would enter this for a kitchen arrangement, a wildflower arrangement, a prairie arrangement, anything like that. Where it is a vase with a neck, I'd love to see something tied around it. It can be a ribbon, it can be baling twine, it can be a string, it can be anything like that. But just something that kind of honors the neck of that vase and helps to anchor your visual of your photo. But for single entries, bud vases are great. Bud vases are super for that. But if it is something that I only have one stem in the display, please make sure it's a perfect one. Nothing with bug eat, nothing if I look down on the bottom that there's aphid stuck on the bottom. We're not missing 3 petals. We weren't really, it wasn't one of those cases of, oh my gosh, you should have seen it yesterday. No, but here's my little Shasta Daisy entry and you want it to be perfect. There's another, you should have seen it yesterday. Oh my gosh, just it's the best one I've ever grown. I'm sure it was. So proportion, scale, I'll give a copy of this too. So if anybody wants that emailed out to them, they can read all those types of things. But think about your color wheel and your color harmony and the art classes that we had in middle school and high school. All of that still applies, whether you have a tertiary color scheme or if you have a complementary color scheme or what you're looking at. And I tell you, there's 3 or 4 standard ones that everybody asks for at the moment. Everybody is wanting the corals and the blues. Whatever the Pantone color is this year, that's what people are going to be asking for the next 3. I was doing baby's breath in mason jars before it was cool. I did it for the 2 years that it was cool. I've been doing it for the 10 years since it was cool because brides are still asking for it. And the bride is always right, even if she's stupid. So I'm wrapping up my 18th wedding season. I've been coordinating weddings for about 12 of those 18 years. I've been officiating weddings for 5 of those 18 years. And then we do about 300 funerals a year through the shop. And so we have seen enough customization and had enough interesting requests. If you want to startle me, you're going to have to try really, really hard. We've had casket sprays that we have put racks of antlers in. I've put ashes in a minnow bucket before. We've had creepy dolls that were hugging the urn on the side of a spray. I've had knitting needles and crochet hooks. I've had poker cards. I've had scarves and gardening gloves. And I've buried 2 butchers and had their knives displayed in the floral arrangements. I had a bride that came to me that says, here is this antler, and it's from the first deer I shot with my dad when I was 9 years old. Can we use it in her bouquet? And I said, sure. And she says, I've got these shotgun shells from my fiance and I shooting skeet. Can you put them in the bouquet? Sure. And she says, I want wheat. Fine. I love burlap roses. Fine. And orange is my favorite color. Can you get some orange stuff in there too? And it's like, this is going to look like a hunter safety course. But it ended up being one of the prettiest bouquets I've ever made, albeit it was heavy, but her biceps were bigger than mine, so she could handle it. But it was a big bouquet.
But did it have a bird-shot frog?
It did not. Really should. Really should. And I think any of you remember Ray's IGA? That was a grocery store in Ottawa for years and years and years. And there was a little old man in there that had migrated from Holland, named Tony Van Leyden. And he was short, white hair, bald, very broken English. And he was the man that when you walked into the grocery, they had those carts at the fronts folded up on them so they could stack in there like you saw in the 70s and 80s. And he would pull out the cart and he would let the basket down and then he would help the lady get it situated so she could set her purse in there and go with her groceries. And he had a soft spot for little kids. And he would always fish in his pocket. And if he had a dime or a quarter, he would always slip a dime or a quarter to little kids when they were in there with mom or grandma shopping for groceries. So, and that's one of, that's a core memory for me as a child. And so now when Tony passed several years ago, I was able to sneak a quarter back into his casket spray as an homage to him. And so I've had several really cool opportunities with that where our family's been in the community for a really long time. I'm the third generation on the same farm. I'm the seventh generation in Franklin County. We have a relationship with probably 9 out of 10 people that walk through our door. And we've had a really cool opportunity to work with their families through their highest highs and their lowest lows. Whether it is the birth of a child or a daddy-daughter dance or a wedding or a funeral or an anniversary or she's really mad and I don't want to sleep on the couch doghouse rose arrangement. Those types of things. And so we become connected with that family on a much more intimate level than a lot of small business owners get the opportunity to with their customer base. And we don't take that for granted, but we really cherish that and honor that and feel really blessed and grateful to have that opportunity. And so I even as some people say, you got an education degree and you quit teaching, what a waste. I use my teaching degree every day. My staff will tell you I go into teacher mode. They claim they like it. I don't know if that's true, but they claim that they do. And I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be because every day is a new adventure and a new opportunity to work with families and to help them express the emotions that they're not sure how to express otherwise. So, see what else we've got here.
That's me.
Oh, that's you? There you go. Go again. There you go. Any questions at this point? I know we've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time.
I think you covered it.
You should be good
So
now.
I've got my email and website and Instagram stuff up here. If anybody have questions or would like to come check out what we do down at Turner Flowers or have any follow-up things, please let us know. That's my planter out in front of the flower shop. It's about a 4 foot across cement planter. It took 8 former Marines to move it 10 feet when I wanted to scoot it, but they got it done. Got a Mandeville in the middle, and then I do the Swedish ivy and the lingering Jew. This is 2 years ago. I've got about half that size now, and I will admit I probably fertilize at triple the required rate, but it works. And then at the farm, we've done up to 7 acres of pumpkins. That's Dad on our state-of-the-art 1955 tractor. That is our newest and largest tractor. We've done up to 7 acres of pumpkins. When they flood, they look like little orange fish bobbers. We've canoed across the field and picked the pumpkins and paddled them up to the bridge, and I don't ever want to do that again. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was hoping just because we see the decline in submissions to the fair.
Yes.
So, I mean, what's something you could say to the 4-H kids or even to adults, an inspiration for why submit?
You know, the fewer people do something, the more satisfaction I feel that there is in saying, oh my gosh, we can still do this. Or, hey, I took the time and I made the investment and I was able to do it. I would also say that for those that go out and try to plow up their yard or dig up a spot and they go, gosh, the soil was hard and it was super hot and it was tedious and the grass grew into it and I just hated it. Try a raised bed if you haven't already. It is amazing what you can get accomplished with a raised bed. I recently went out, there was a gentleman and his wife that had bought 50 acres down by Ottawa, and he came out and he says, I just want you to walk through the place and tell me what we can do with it. They had been out there 1 year and he had started a raised bed about 400 yards away from his house. And he had plowed up a little bit of ground, but there was weeds all in it, and he tried to fence it in and keep it out, and it was just a hot mess express. And I said, well, buddy, I'm here to tell you the first thing I would do is move these raised beds up there by your garden so that it is manageable for your family to be able to take care of this. Anybody that's going to garden, you can easily get overwhelmed by how many things there are that you want to grow and how many ways there are to grow it and how many varieties or cultivars there are of any given fruit, of any given vegetable. And you just have to narrow it down and make sure it's manageable. Because if it's not manageable, it's not going to be fun and you're not ever going to want to do it again. You pick those 2 or 3 flowers that are your favorites. You pick those 2 or 3 vegetables that are your favorites. And you work on those and growing those the very best that you can. And even if you only have 1 or 2 entries at the fair, that's great. And then once we've got those down, you can say, well, I can add these 1 or 2 things next year, and I can add these 1 or 2 things next year. During the pandemic in 2020, we saw so many people gravitate towards gardens, and I feel like they thought that they had to try 50 different things in their gardens. And by midsummer, they had lots of half-grown things and lots of weeds, and they were bored and they were frustrated, and they were going to Menards and buying a cheap pool and spent the rest of the summer pandemic just floating and saying, "Yeah, there's that garden. I'm not ever doing that again." So keeping it manageable, keeping it fun, and just giving it a try, I think, is the most important thing that we can encourage people and encourage youth to do, is to keep, and that goes for any job, any hobby, anything in our life. We've got to make it manageable in order for it to be fun and for us to do it justice. I would rather have 1 or 2 hobbies or 1 or 2 jobs and do them really, really well than have 50 different jobs and be on 8 different committees and, pardon my French, half-ass all of them. I would rather do a few things really, really well. And so that's what I would suggest to folks that maybe haven't tried it or did try it and got discouraged.
Couple things.
Yeah.
Volunteering at the fair is one of my favorite things. I love it. And working with this guy, he is a hoot, if you didn't know that. And his predecessor, but I gotta tell you, his teaching, when he does the consultation with the 4-H kids, it is wonderful to eavesdrop and hear the questions he asks them. He delves into why'd you do this, what did you do, what did you want to do. It's a wonderful experience for those kids if they're paying attention. So, brownie points. The other thing is I've entered a lot of things. I have every color of ribbon, but for me, the yellow participation ribbon is your most important ribbon. I've said this for a long time. The fair, the county fair, the grounds, everything, they're our most important partner. They're our host, they're our landlord. We need to support the fair and participate. Doesn't matter what color you get. The participation ribbon means you stepped up and participated. It's been getting smaller. The entries, they used to be really crowded. Some years they're not.
Last year was pretty strong, but it's a really good drawing
Yes,
year.
participation. But now I got a question.
Okay.
You mentioned the handy wrap earlier,
Yeah.
and I've seen different ones describe that. I don't use it to plug up their cover. I use it as a support.
You're using it as
It's
strong.
clear, and so, I know you judge 4-H, not the open class, but for instance, your daisy stem, I want it to stand straight up
Sure.
instead of leaning against the edge.
You can
For
do
some of the
that.
things you mentioned, the edge can damage it, but, it doesn't work for me to put it over the top and poke a hole through it. I
Wadded up. and
want
stuff
a
down there.
aluminum ring of it and put it, but it's
okay.
judgeable.
As
I mean,
long
they
as your
don't.
container reaches the regulations of the fair, you're good.
Okay,
You're not allowed to put cellophane over the top of it.
Right.
okay, well, somebody said that, I thought that doesn't really
No,
work.
But when people do floral designs, they sometimes do floral tape in a crisscross to make a
It's big,
mesh
a larger
across
one.
the top. Yeah.
But for that, so you
Yeah,
see
you
no
can roll it up,
problem with
put it
the
down.
ring of cellophane
So, yeah,
that supports it, holds it up. That's my question. Okay.
yep, for sure. Great questions. Yes, sir.
Where is Turner Flowers located?
3rd and Main, Ottawa, Kansas.
Third and Main now.
So if you know where the courthouse is in downtown Ottawa, same side of the street in the first block north of there.
And I'm looking for one more volunteer for the fair.
Yeah, I'll be there,
When is it?
July.
Yeah, live last full week.
Hold on, I will give you the date and time that I need a volunteer.
Third week of July.
So I will be up here on July the 29th. It's a Monday. I will judge from 1 until 6. It used to be like 1 until 7 or 12 until 8, and we narrowed it down. It's worked great. But we do know that Scotty Thelman will rush in on 2 wheels at about 5:20.
Gotcha.
But then the open class isn't judged until the next morning by Dad, and this will be his 51st year of judging at the Douglas County Fair this year. So they got him donuts and coffee and stuff last year to honor his 50th, and I know he was really tickled with that. But
Open class entries on Monday, bring it in on Monday.
Yep, but then those 4-H kids that we judged them with their consultation judging, that's Monday afternoon from 1 to 6 on the 29th, and it's a cool experience.
And remember what he said, read the fair book, it's online, you can look, there's different categories. I look it up ahead of time, I get the number of the class and the name of whatever I'm entering. It's helpful for the people there at the desk, but everything you need to know is in the fair book. Just need to read it.
Every year we get families that are rummaging through their pre-entry cards and sorting through plates, and you can tell they've never touched that book. And if they would just crack that book, it's kind of like a driving test. If you crack the book, you're gonna pass the test.
It's free. You don't have to pay to enter, which is free. Get right in here.
So if there's no other questions, that's all I've got. I sure appreciate you having me today. It's a lot of fun.